So I did a third grade lesson connecting the water cycle to the sun and making sure that the students understood how much of an impact the sun has on the water cycle. And so I believe that I used appropriate vocabulary such as evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff, collection, energy, and heat energy. All of these tied together because energy and heat energy were used to describe characteristics of the sun, while the rest were used are steps of the water cycle. And so we went through those kind of as a brain warmer to warm up the students' brains to talk about the water cycle, make sure that was fresh. And then later on, we connected heat energy and energy to the water cycle through a process of prompted questions and guided questions. One misconception that I hit during the video was about the collection process in the water cycle is that a lot of the time students think that collection and evaporation only happens from the ocean. While that is a majority of where our evaporation and the collection of rainwater and everything like that does happen, it also collects in lakes, rivers, and ponds, even puddles. And so that was one misconception I hit to make sure students understood that yes, the majority does come from the ocean, but it's not the only option. This lesson was built off of student interaction through thinking, processing, and answering questions. So my level 1 questioning were what I like to call brain warmers. It's just getting the students thinking, activating their schema, and getting them to really process through what we're about to go into and making sure that they're on the right track, and this is where they need to be. So my brain warming questions were filling out the anchor chart of the water cycle. We went through and filled out evaporation, condensation, precipitation, runoff, and collection. So that really got the students engaged because they were able to go up to the board and write on the board. So it got them engaged and got their brains thinking on that level 1 style of questioning. My level 2 style of questioning was more targeted on getting the students to think about the whole how the sun plays into the water cycle. And so before students were able to make the connection between the sun and the water cycle, we had to list some characteristics of the sun that the students did know just off of their schema. And so some of the things that they listed was the sun is hot, the sun is in space. And from there, I guided the question along since the sun is in space, what is the sun? And that was where some wait time was added for the students to really think and process, and then they came to the resolution that the sun is a star. And so now that we had listed all the characteristics of the sun, the students were able to kind of start processing and connect it to the water cycle because the sun is drawn on our anchor chart. So they knew already that the sun already played a role in the water cycle. So once the students made that connection that the sun made the connection between the characteristics of the sun, we were able to connect it to the water cycle a lot easier, comparing energy to heat energy. And so the students already knew what energy was from a previous lesson. And so when I said, what is heat energy, they were able to make the connection. They knew that energy is something that changes something else. So if you apply heat to something, then it has to change it. And so they made that connection that energy is the same as heat energy, but it's just the change is through heat. So once the students made that connection that the sun applies heat energy to the water, that is where the water cycle starts. This connection again was made through the steps in the water cycle when asking, what starts the water cycle? The student replies, it starts at evaporation, which is caused by the star, the sun, heat energy. So the students made that connection themselves. My level 3 questionings were challenging, and they made the students think a little bit deeper on the sun and how it really does affect the water cycle. And so I went ahead and asked the question, if we didn't have the sun, would the water evaporate? A student replies, I don't think so, to which I then replied, what do you think would happen if we never had the sun? And then the students promptly answered, there wouldn't be any heat energy, so the water could not evaporate. So this also showed me, the teacher, that the students made the connection that heat energy is applied for the water to evaporate, for the water cycle to start. So I was able to see that they made that connection as kind of an assessment question in a way, in the level 3. And then it also showed me that they were starting to think really deeply in how the sun really applies to the water cycle. And so then that started the discussion, and it went a lot deeper, asking if there was no water cycle, what would happen? And the student replied the water wouldn't be clean, because the water would just sit all the time and it wouldn't be going through the cycle and being self-cleaning in a way. We talked about how it would affect Earth, how it would affect the crops and our farming, and how long would we survive. And so then the following activity after this lesson, the students would have had to go to their seat and write how long they think we would last without the sun, not only like keeping Earth warm, but without the water cycle as well. And so this lesson was done through questioning levels 1, 2, and 3. There were some misconceptions hit. Wait time was allotted for students to think and process through questions. And this was done for connecting the water cycle to the sun, and how the sun is so important for that water cycle to start.